How are they to believe him whom they have not heard? And how are they to hear if no one preaches? The word has power. It is said, one man and God is a majority. Patrick stood alone on this emerald isle, but with God. That same God had prepared him, for he had learnt the language and the culture in slavery. And it would seem that in a dream or even visions, he had to come back. The Irish calling to return. Initially, Pope Celestine had appointed Palladius as bishop for the as yet pagan Ireland, but within a year he was dead, and word got through to the Apostolic See that there was a man who knew the culture. As it happens, he was also full of the culture of the best of the Western Church in the monastic world, for he had been exposed to the cross currents, for instance, at the Holy Isle of Les Reims, which is just off the coast of France near Cannes. And there, from ancient times, monks had been and great monks had passed, including the great John Cassian, who had gone round the desert of Egypt with Germanus, his friend, and noted down the sayings of the fathers, their teachings. And St. Benedict had commanded that these be read every evening at Compline. So the young Patrick was exposed to all that. Hence, when he came, it was a peaceful evangelization that took place, strangely enough, with no bloodshed. It's quite rare. It was serene, anchored precisely in prayer and contemplative prayer, for the church, both here and in Wales, had one thing in common, that it was heavily monasticized, and the cloister was the center of radiation. So natural, peaceful, long-term evangelization through culture and presence. Why? In the Wild West, bring a few places of peace and tranquility, learning will come, people will be drawn, young men will be educated, the infirm will be healed, and there will be peace in an area which is attractive and inviting. Whereas the Druids, as we know from the likes of Julius Caesar, who talks of them, were feared. They had power over life and death. And it was a fear linked with the dark side. Go to places like Newgrange, Louth and Douth, not far from here, and you will see how terrified they were of the dark. They tried their best to have some insurance policy against the horrible dark of the unknown beyond, putting the ashes of the deceased in this spot which would catch the first rays at the solstice and so on, to be energized. Perhaps that most powerful thing can help them, the sun. Now, Patrick is an interesting saint to have as one's patron, for different from many ancient saints, we can read him, we can know him. He was, by the time he was ordained a bishop, well educated. He has good Latin, the language of the culture, also the language of liturgy, and he uses it. Now, the word confession doesn't, in the first instance, in this ecclesiastical period, mean confession of sins, but it's a translation of the Hebrew which means to confess, that is to give thanks. In Hebrew there is no direct word for thank you and to give thanks, but one confesses. That's how it's said. And so this confessio is a giving thanks to the Creator precisely for the mirabilia Dei that he is witnessing in his hands, the marvels of God. He talks, for instance, in this way: who am I that the God of creation should collaborate with me and work in my hands? He's referring to precisely what missionaries have always experienced in the first wave of evangelization. They can't do it, humanly speaking, so another force comes in, the miraculous, the providential, and that, of course, converts. Put simple people before miracles, and the rest is history. The convincing force of a power greater than what they know, without the B-side of death and curse. When I was in Rome, I was living after ordination for a while with missionaries, and the rector of the house was talking about things in the first evangelization. He was about 80 and given all his life to Africa, where he wanted to go back and die. And he put it this way: here in Rome, we're surrounded with priests. There's a great concentration of young priests in Rome, studying and so on. So everywhere you go, you've got this bulwark of light and grace. The Holy Sacrifice is offered on every street. Everywhere in Rome there is prayer and there is Christian grace. It's not the same when for the first time the light of the gospel goes to a dark land which has been in the possession of you know who, and is not in a hurry to let go. And so the two meet in the first wave, and it's hand-to-hand combat, front-line warfare with Satan. And he went into some detail about the manifestations that he knew and saw. Satan is for real! An American talking. And he went on to describe some of the things that would be manifesting themselves in the period when, immediately after the first evangelization, you've got what? A bit of overlapping. Just to be sure, a bit of what has always worked. Therefore, a bit of the old stuff lingering. Fetishes and what they seem to fall back on as being safer, just in case. It's murky and it's messy. Make a jump in time to 2025 in Ireland. This bit here is in the same way, in reverse, coming back. We know from those who have studied the realm of exorcism and New Age that there was a first attempt to bring in New Age practices and belief into Ireland, and it was resisted with a great force of strong faith and repulsion. Then, bit by bit, they were able to get through and do what they'd never succeeded in doing before, within the culture itself, using even the structures there in the church property, to bring in, bit by bit, a little bit of the other, which, let's get it straight, is just more of the same old thing. Anything that brings in the rights of Satan will be pushed by that same Satan. Healing, Reiki healing, all these energies, they can apparently work in the immediate. But look at the future. It's at a cost. Satan can deceive with his own healing. He can even make people ill first, so as to reverse it, so as to get a foothold. He's very clever. Add that right now, in this land where grace was so strong, he's managed now to get a foothold into all the preaching that is out there. I mean, the pulpit of Satan. Now, not only the television and the radio all the time, but also the accepted norm on social media. So all the time, the people of this holy isle are exposed to the preaching of this force, bit by bit, whittling away, little by little, the fullness of faith that only 50 years ago was still strong in this land. Today, my friends, it's actually even gone even further. I was just talking this last week to a young priest friend of mine in Britain, a Welsh convert, and he was saying that he had just visited St. David's, where the body of St. David is, and he had found that the place where he was born, St. Non's Well, where he had been born there by this holy virgin who had been violated by a man, that she had the child, and the miraculous well is still there. It was full of all kinds of things that were suggesting New Age practice. He tried to exorcise the whole area, the whole thing, get rid of all these dolls and things that were in there, and the next day they were back. And he had an awareness, there was a dense feeling of evil presence in the whole of that sacred area. Likewise in Ireland. I was one day going up the hill of Slane and met by people who came down and asked, because they were themselves, "Are you a Druid?" Go to Tara, what will you find? There's a whole area there taken over by them. Go to Loch Rule, what will you find? We were there one time, and as long as you can open your eyes, you can see exactly what's going on up there. Satanic signs, as well as an old moss rock with the 4 crosses on it. Recuperation of what was sacred and what St. Patrick and his army of saints did. My friends, if Patrick were to come back, he would weep. The serpents which he expelled are back, and they are reigning. Let's open our eyes and be fully aware that this is not just social history. It's front-line combat between the light and the darkness who wants immortal souls.